All right, everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch Collective podcast. I am with my beautiful wife, Dr. Robyn Sonnier and Dr. Brooke Bartlett. Ladies, how are we doing?
Good.
Doing great.
Woo! Sweet. It is Friday afternoon. I just woke up because I worked graveyard last night.
On Christmas.
On Christmas. Fixed us an old fashioned. And Brooke, what are you drinking over there?
I'm drinking some Kaio. It's a Japanese whiskey.
Sweet. Cheers.
Cheers.
Love it. All right. First, I'm going to mention two things, and then we'll kind of kick things off. So I'm going to give an update on our therapy statistics. So as of December 26, 2025, the Overwatch Collective has spent $315,501.50. Don't ask me where the 50 cents comes from. We've either fully covered or financially assisted 3,027 therapy sessions and connected 288 people to our therapist, and or sent them to an inpatient retreat where we cover 50% of the cost. So thank you, everybody, for your support, your donations. And then I'll mention really quick our podcast sponsor, Brain Performance Technologies, specialty mental health clinic that treats patients with TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation. TMS delivers electrical pulses to specific areas on the scalp to alter brainwave activity and treat various conditions, including depression, TBI, PTSD, anxiety, ADHD, OCD, addiction disorders. It's drug-free, non-invasive, improves brainwave function, sleep, mood, and bigger gains in your mental health. Brain Performance Technologies offers different protocols, including RTMS, TMS, MERT, SAINT. And then if you want to learn more about them, go to 1bpt.com or listen to season 9, episode 20 of our podcast. Okay, that's enough of me talking. Every time after I do the intro, I'm like, all right, you take it away. The guest take it away. So I'm going to leave it up to either one of you. You guys are both the doctors here. You have way too many acronyms behind your names. I can't even go on.
Robyn has a lot of acronyms behind her name.
I do, but I'm still not as fancy as Rick.
True. Okay, so whoever wants to go first, do an intro of yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Go ahead, Robyn.
Oh, damn. Okay, well, I am Robyn Sonnier. I recently got my doctorate of professional counseling, where I did my research specifically on trauma with the military and first responder population. I am located in Lafayette, Louisiana, but licensed in North Carolina, Louisiana, and Arizona, specializing in trauma, OCD, and military and first responders. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, I also do IFS, so internal family systems. I'm level 2 trained through the IFS Institute, EMDR certified, just got trained in CPT, which I know Brooke is trained in as well, so I'm sure we'll talk about that. Yeah, I don't know. That's about it. Yeah.
Sweet.
Nice. My name is Brooke Bartlett. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm specifically a first responder and military trauma psychologist. So all my training and background is in doing clinical work, meaning therapy and research with military and first responders. So my training background, I spent about 10 years doing my clinical rotations and trainings in different VAs and combat units. Within the VA system, I also had the very fortunate opportunity to spend all 5 years of my doctoral training embedded in public safety departments, doing research, learning the ins and outs of things like critical incident response, culture, etc. So after finishing my postdoctoral residency at the San Diego VA, I then opened up my own business, which I almost exclusively work with agencies and first responders. And I, in addition to working with agencies, I do provide therapy in 43 states. So I'm not going to list all those out, but it's easier to list out the ones I don't practice in. That's me.
Yeah, awesome. I know that's how it is on our website, where it's like she can see you in all of these states,
Hawaii,
except
Louisiana.
Yeah, Louisiana is one of them I can. So yeah, Louisiana, Hawaii, Alaska, New Mexico, Iowa, New York, Massachusetts.
Yeah. Too bad you didn't have Hawaii, because that's like the 50th state. That's the last state that we need.
Yeah.
And you can't drive out there to go link up with a therapist to try to vet them.
This is a pain in the ass to get licensed there. It's hard to get. I mean, it's just like for psychologists, it's like a lot of the states, most states make it a little bit easier if you're licensed in other states to kind of like through reciprocity get licensed there. But Hawaii doesn't mess around. They're like, no, we're charging you full price and you're doing everything. So
Maybe that's why it's so difficult for us to find somebody. But so for those of you that are listening, obviously you just heard their background and everything. Robyn and I, we are married. We got married
Woohoo!
July 19th. We did a surprise wedding, which was
Mhm.
absolutely incredible. And then we got some big things coming up for us in life, which is exciting. But obviously, the both of you two are the Overwatch Collective. You're contracted therapist with us. So I kind of just want to start with that just for a few minutes, touch on that really briefly. Um, Brooke, I know that you're contracted with agencies and working with them, and like we work together a lot. And then obviously we're always talking about this, where um, like kind of essentially what talk has become, which we never imagined that it would be, is such a good resource for our community. So um, if we could just touch on that for a few minutes and talk about like being contracted with an agency, first responders not really knowing where to go, and then being able to pass them off to us, and then the process of going with us.
Yeah, I mean, what you guys have done is incredible. I mean, it's just such a massive resource. I bring up talk in every single training I give to agencies and in most like keynotes that I give at conferences. What I typically repeat multiple times when I'm up there with your logo up there and I'm talking about it is I say over and over again, there is no catch to this, because the first thing people think is that there's a catch to it. And I'm like, there
Mhm.
is no catch to this. Most of my first responders that have seen me in therapy through my practice have their therapy fully or partially funded through the Overwatch Collective. So it's just been such a massive resource, for folks, because therapy is expensive. And the more specialized you get, um, unfortunately, the less likely that someone's going to be taking insurance. It's the same. Like I have like an MD that I see that specializes in, a specific naturopathic MD. She doesn't take insurance. She's very, very specialized in what she does. So it's kind of similar on the therapy side of things. So it's understandably difficult to afford for many people. So what Talk has done in providing this financial assistance is just massive. I mean, I have seen several people that you guys have helped with their helped cover their therapy, that have finished therapy saying like, without this, I might not be here. So
Mhm.
it's awesome. You really saved a lot of lives.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I kind of I want to hear your opinion too. But I think it's just crazy that like you two are so well trained and culturally competent. We'll get into that later. That a lot of the times departments they want to contract with kind of like cheaper therapists because it's all about money.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about this where it's so
Mhm.
frustrating because they're like, oh, if we can get somebody for $100 and just like check that box and pass them off, and they could do
Yep.
10 sessions per incident, whatever. Where I mean, you two are
Mhm.
expensive, and the well trained therapists are expensive, but that's kind of the frustrating thing for me to see.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that a lot too. I'm contracted with you guys, but I'm also contracted with the Headstrong Project for military members that have trauma, and then I fought to get a reasonable rate with the local department EAP, which that was a whole thing, because initially when they wanted to contract me, they really lowballed my rate, like less than what my interns at the agency I own charge. It was really insulting. But thankfully, they came around to a reasonable rate. And so, the big thing that I always heard was a lot of people were coming to me after going through something like an EAP therapist or VA therapist, or things of that nature, or a therapist that said they work with veterans or first responders, and like they probably had one veteran first responder on their caseload, that wasn't even really working on a veteran or first responder issue or something in that realm, right? And then go to that, therapist, and then have not so great an experience. But I know that the clients that I see, whether they're through y'all or even through, EAP or whatever, if they come to me, they have to request me specifically through the EAP, of course, because they're paying me more. Um, but they're very appreciative of having the option, because it is, you know, really not affordable. And I have a military first responder rate for when, they're not going through that. So that's different too. But I mean, it's hard and I still have my free therapy sessions for veterans too. So if my whole caseload was that, I would be in a pickle financially. If I only had like free and then heavily discounted sessions. But I know that they're, super appreciative because the pay, and we just talked about this last night, I think actually, how crummy the pay is for first responders, across the board, like EMS, fire, police, and just kind of the stuff that you guys are exposed to. I know you had a really, really rough call last night on Christmas. And we were just talking about the exposure and then the lack of strong, like, mental health resources available, or the lack of income to pay for quality, mental health resources for that, which is just super upsetting. But it feels good to be involved in something to like fill that gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last night was a struggle, and it's kind of just a reminder. Like, I feel like every once in a while you kind of just like get like kicked in the ass, and it's just a reminder of actually what you do. Because like now, like I work graveyard and I have like a really good team, and a majority of the time it's fun. Like, we go on every call together. We're sitting behind the gas station parking lot, and we're all shooting the shit with each other. Well,
And handing out Oreo balls to
and
citizens.
and handing out Oreo balls that Robyn makes to citizens, all that stuff. Well,
And making them film thank you videos.
yeah. Oh, did you show her?
No, I need to send you the video.
Yeah,
Greg got handing a family of 4 I made a bunch of Oreo balls for his squad mates because they were, working Christmas. And I was like, oh, I want to do something nice, for y'all working Christmas. I said, one condition though, thinking he would share it with just the squad, right? And I was like, you got to film everyone saying thank you and how good they are, right? Just as a joke. Well, of course I got those videos, but then I randomly get a video of 4 citizens in a car.
That's really
Thank
funny.
you, Miss Robyn, for the Oreo balls. And I'm like, what is this?
Well, I had so many. We were on an accident scene, so like once everything like checked out and we were good, I went back and I got the whole thing of Oreo balls, and I went up to like fire the medics. I was like, "Do you want an Oreo ball?" The guy that got hit head on, I was like, "I think I know what'll make you better. Here's an Oreo ball." And then the family of 4, I just waved him down. I was like, "Here's an Oreo ball." Sent her a video, all that. So
But yeah, offering an Oreo ball in these trying times.
yeah, which is like so rare. But it literally, the night kicked off with an unfortunate death by suicide
On
while
Christmas Day.
while the family was celebrating Christmas. So they were opening up stockings, preparing to open up gifts. The dining room table was already set, and then husband and wife get into like a little verbal argument, whatever. Literally, the husband goes in the other room, grabs a pistol, shoots himself in the head while the entire family's there. So I'm sitting out front of the house, and then she comes out to like say hi. I'm like, I gotta go. So that was like the kickoff to this, our Christmas Day. But touching on like circling back to like what you two just mentioned, like with the resources, with the lack of resources, the lack of pay, it's just so challenging. You touch on the lack of resources in addition to the stigma and the lack of wanting to reach out for help. Like, I feel like it's a recipe for disaster. But I'm kind of curious, Brooke, like with you being contracted with some departments, I know you're going out and doing all these presentations. What are some of the main things that you're seeing?
As it pertains to just around mental health in public safety, a lot of people don't know a lot of what's available out there. I will also say, so part of what I do, as you guys know, a lot of what I do is I get brought out to do speaking engagements and trainings with first responders and agencies. And like, even though I'm there for maybe one day or doing one talk, those people in the audience, there's many times I get people who email me afterwards, who wait until I'm getting in my car and they knock on my window so no one else sees them, and they'll say like, I had no idea. I thought there was something wrong with me. Like I related to a lot of what you just said, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And so that type of information is a lot of first responders don't have any of this type of information, not just about, hey, here are therapy resources, but a lot of first responders don't know how and when to start kind of like focusing on certain things until shit hits the fan. Right. And so I'll have folks come in and be like, I've been on the job for 30 years. Now I have these moments where I'm just breaking down crying. I can taste blood in my sleep. What's wrong with me? And Have you ever gone to therapy? Have you ever learned about post-traumatic stress? Have you ever learned about the impact that trauma and stress has neurobiologically on your brain? No. I think there's something wrong with me though. Now I'm like, this is a normal reaction to 30
Mhm.
years on the job if you've not really ever done anything.
Mhm.
Just like you'd say to I always say, professional athlete. If you talk to a professional athlete and they said, I've been on this job, doing this job for 25 years. I've never done any PT. I've never learned about rehab. I've never done any of that. And my body's hurting. What's wrong with me? We'd be like, well, you're a professional athlete. Like this is kind of what happens after 25 years, especially if you haven't like really kind of done proactive things to mitigate some of this. So that's what I see the most in the first responder world, is that a lot of people don't have just baseline information about mental health, like the science behind the brain and what happens with
Mhm.
trauma and stress. And it's not to say, oh, you're going to have PTSD. That's absolutely not it. It's about just like, this is normal stuff. We need to normalize it and get that information out, because when they have the information, they're able to kind of notice, man, I'm feeling really extra jumpy after the shifts this week. There's a couple of bad calls. Like, what can I do to kind of make sure I get my baseline back? Right.
Mhm.
Instead of waiting 20 years to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I also feel like too, I see that, but I also see sometimes people are so afraid of what it means to have PTSD that they just avoid it with all like, what would you say? Like, all whatever possible. So they're just like constantly trying to avoid getting that label. But for me, the big thing that I try to kind of focus in on with people is you don't have to have PTSD forever, right? Like it's not a lifelong diagnosis. If you do therapy and you do the work and all those things, you can get out of meeting criteria for PTSD, right? And so you can essentially do things to recover. And,
Yeah.
it's the way that I kind of try to tell people. So it's not this like, you're stuck with it forever kind of thing. You can recover from PTSD. You can no longer meet criteria for PTSD. And I find that once people realize that a little bit too, they're a little bit more open to acknowledging, okay, maybe I do have some post-traumatic stress stuff going on now that I know that I don't have to be diagnosed with PTSD for the
Yeah.
rest of my life kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is that it's if someone is at the point where they have post-traumatic stress disorder, which is just another word for clinically significant symptoms of post-traumatic stress, meaning they're chronic, they're severe, they're causing a lot of problems in someone's life. If someone is at that point, it's not permanent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Neuroplasticity of the brain. And then along with
Mm-hmm.
that, Robin, too, I would say is that I find a lot of first responders, like you said, it's almost like this avoidance. So if they notice any normative symptoms of acute stress or post-traumatic stress, not all post-traumatic stress is post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Meaning
Right.
like
Exactly.
we don't want to pathologize normal human reactions. Now, it doesn't mean we want to avoid it and let it sit and put our head in the ground like an ostrich for many years, but it means that, okay, I'm experiencing this. I know why, I know what's going on. What do I need to do so that I can help mitigate this before it,
Mm.
turns into the D at the end,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I talk to people too, especially when I do presentations on PTSD. I do a lot of education on peritraumatic stress and how normal that is. And,
Yep.
most of the time it does subside within 2 weeks if you let those natural emotions and those natural reactions like have their space to do that. It's when we avoid, right? And when we kind of try to avoid all of those things that we kind of are setting ourselves up more than not, right? But yeah, there is peritraumatic stuff that is going to come up, very normal. And I always tell people too, it's normal reactions to abnormal circumstances, right? I think for first responders and some military, depending on, kind of what they're experiencing, which I hate always lumping like first responders and military together. That's a pet peeve of mine because they're two very, very different populations. But I don't even know where I was going with that, but abnormal circumstances, right?
Yeah.
So for a first responder specifically, though, like the repeated exposure to trauma, that becomes so normal to you, but it's not normal, right? Like I was telling, a friend of mine, I'm like, it's not normal for people to see multiples brains blown out. Like
Yeah.
that's not normal. That's not
Yeah.
normal, but it's normal for a first responder, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's normal for someone who's been on the job for 20 years to have seen that multiple times,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I guess And this is kind of the nice thing, like right with like having the both of you, and then like me as the active police officer. So like last night, if I'm going to touch on this call last night really quick. So we go to this, pull up to this house, this beautiful family, and right when I park, I see all the family members outside sobbing, crying, screaming.
Hmm.
Right? Go inside, and the first thing in my head is scene security. Where's the body? Where's the firearm? And then what are the next steps? Right? So
Hmm.
it's like everybody outside in the garage. Where's the ambulance at? Where's the firearm? Who's got the crime scene log? And you do this job for so long. I feel I actually just hit
11.
11 years
Mhm.
recently. But you do this job for so long that it just becomes like a checklist, right? Like that's
Hmm.
their worst day. And
Yeah.
we were talking about it, like now every time the Christmas lights come on around the neighborhood, they're going to be triggered. They're going to remember that their
Yeah.
grandfather, husband, dad killed himself in the room, literally right next to them. But we go into just like straight work mode where it's like, all right, what are things that need to be done? All right, cool. Do I need to be here anymore? Is the scene secure? Can I go and go visit home or go back and eat the rest of my food? Like
Hmm.
after literally watching the ambulance bring the dude by and there's brain matter and everything dripping all over the hallway and everything, like just disgusting stuff. But then you sit there and then you have people that are like, damn, this is a beautiful house, or like, oh, they got a Chick-fil-A gift card, like
Hmm.
that's legit. And you're just like, oh my God. And I didn't realize it until I started doing talk and all these podcasts and everything, that like, wow, we're really like messed up, and like you have that like dark humor and you have the morbid, what is it, morbid
Curiosity.
curiosity, where like I didn't need to go into his office and see
Yeah.
the actual crime scene, but I was curious, I wanted to, so I go there, I shine a flash, I'm like, ooh, that's messed up. And then I go back in my unit to go home and I'm like, I got to finish this report from last night, and I'm typing the report on the way back to come to the house to visit.
But that is so crucial, and I think that that's something that civilian citizens, they're gonna see that in a negative light, right? But that is a protective mechanism that helps you to be able to do your job
Yeah.
efficiently,
Yeah.
right? So it's a good thing for first responders specifically to have so that they can, you know, contain in a sense, or
Mhm.
have the ability to contain that level of exposure, whereas like other people won't have that, right? Like it's not normal for someone who's not constantly put in those situations to have that same level of curiosity and detachment and things of that nature. But that is so necessary for first responders to have in order for you to effectively do your job, right?
Mhm.
But outsiders don't necessarily get that. And if you're going to someone, for example, like a therapist that doesn't get that, or feels like that's super insensitive, or,
Yeah.
like, why would you need to do that?
Mhm.
Or, whatever, they're not gonna understand how like protective that is, and how like in a sense necessary that is for you
Yeah.
to be able to do. And I know that sounds fucked a little bit, and I mean it is fucked, there's no way around that, but that's also necessary for you to be able to do your job the way that we need first responders to do their jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's necessary to do that, but then I think what you two just touched on is after the 2 weeks, or when you start, like you can't do this and then next week go to a vehicle fatality and see that and then be like, all right, let me finish the burrito that's in my car before it gets cold. Like you can
Yeah.
only do that so long before you start to see signs, symptoms of shit going south, and then you're like finally going to therapy and you're like, oh my God, where do I even begin? Like,
Hmm.
Brooke, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, so exactly what Robin's saying, right? It's an adaptive part of to do your job. It's adaptive. I mean, I would even say not that Robin and I's job is nearly as it doesn't involve all this the same degree of what you do, Greg. But I mean, we hear some pretty fucked up stuff all the time, right? I mean, we can have 5, 6 sessions in a day that like someone wanting to kill themselves, hearing all these details, and I can if I let myself get emotionally involved in every session, then I would not be able to do this anymore, right?
Mhm.
And so there are some times where I'm like, I can't detach from it, right? And but it's just a necessary part of the job. So I do find that, or I always talk about how adaptive it is for first responders to be able to kind of disconnect emotionally while you're on the job, so that you can run through your procedures, so that you can keep yourself safe, so that you can keep everyone around you safe, right? All these things are important. When it becomes problematic is um the way our brain processes emotions, it's not, if we just detach from them and we don't acknowledge them ever, that they just stay away and that they just go away, which is why we see a buildup, right? And this buildup often takes years. It can take years and years. But again, this isn't just something amorphous. This is the buildup on the brain. We have the science to see it now. So, being able to disconnect on the job is good, necessary. But if the switch is off all the time, even when we go home and it's just off all the time, that's when that accumulation can start. And so I do a lot of just like with my peer support trainings and my peer supporters and in therapy too. It's not about like, okay, we're going to learn how to switch it back, your emotional switch back on when you go off shift. That's not realistic either. But I like to think of it as like one of those, sliding
Like a
lights,
dimmer.
dimmer. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can kind of like get, and sometimes it might be wonky. Sometimes it's like, no, it's not coming back on today. Right. But, we can kind of move it, have a little bit more range on it. So it's not just a switch off all the time.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I do a similar exercise called affect dial, which is pretty much, the same. And then I wrote down too, something I really talk about a lot, not just with military and first responder clients, but just with someone working with trauma in general, is I talk a lot about proactive versus reactive coping. And I feel like a lot of people wait until shit hits the fan to start utilizing coping skills. And I always tell people, I'm like, do you see sports teams waiting until game time to start using these skills? No, they practice, 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 so that when it's game time, it's like muscle memory, right? Like it feels like really organic and natural for them. So we have to do the same thing in terms of coping and being able to kind of take care of ourselves mentally. And I find a lot of people, not just military first responders, just people in general, they wait until things, like you said earlier, right? Or like shit's hitting the fan, and then they're like, oh, like what's going on. But the more proactive we can be about coping versus reactive, the better, because then it just feels a lot more organic. And then two, the parts of our brain that are activated by trauma do not help us to think efficiently about what's going to help us to feel better in the moment. Like our brain is literally not working the same way it does when we're in a state of calm or, deactivation. So you're kind of setting yourself up if you think that you can just do everything and then not take care of yourself. And then when you need to take care of yourself, oh yeah, like I can do some deep breathing or I can, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to work if you're only reactive. You have to be proactive in that sense too. And I know it's really hard for a lot of people when you have busy schedules and if you have children and you have, all these different things, or you have to work overtime, or if, you're in the military and you're on orders and, or you're doing 2-week field training and things of that nature, right? Like it can be really hard. But the more proactive you can be about that, the better you're setting yourself up for when shit inevitably does hit the fan, because guess what? That's what it means to be a human,
Well, and it's inevitable, right? Like as a human, everybody goes through shit. And that's why we talk like when it's like, hey, we specialize in first responder military, but also like humans die by suicide. I've been on plenty of suicide calls. Humans divorce. Humans have civilians trauma, substance misuse, etc. But when you talk about us in our community, and like when I heard you talk about that, and it's like the proactive, it's like, do you wait for sports teams to wait until game day? We, like when I went to the police academy 10 years ago, and then like, like Marine Corps boot camp, they don't sit you down and talk about mental health, the resources that you have available. They don't talk about any of the shit that you guys are talking that we honestly need to know about.
Yeah.
So the proactiveness, I feel like what the first responder community is trying to get better. Like my brother's department with Pasadena Fire Department in Southern California, they're doing biannual check-ins with a therapist, which may not be like the end all be all, but it's a step in the right direction to get you connected to a therapist, or even just a conversation around therapy and going and checking in. Because how many times have you both seen it where you get a first responder in there that's like, I had no idea where to go, but I knew I was struggling, where it's like in the police, fire, dispatch academy, correctional academy, whatever, if they were offered a learning domain, resources where it's like, you are going to see all this shit. This is the effects on the brain. You need to have a therapist or two on standby just in case you need it. then you would totally eliminate the first responder struggling and then being like therapist near me
It
Yeah.
or
doesn't even have
Kaiser
to
Blue
be.
Shield, you know, like
It doesn't even have to be a therapist. I think people, and I know Brooke, you've talked about this before, I think in some of your clips you do on your Instagram and stuff like that, but just the power of talking about it. So it doesn't even have to necessarily be with a therapist, but if you have a trusted
mm,
peer, you know, that you feel like you can just release a little bit to, again, just talking about it can be super, super helpful. I know, and you can probably say more on that because I know you've talked about it, I think either in podcasts or
mhm.
definitely in some clips. I know you've talked about that.
Yeah. So to add to everything that you guys have been saying is this kind of goes back to what I was saying is what I see most often in the first responder community is that there's a lot of first responders that don't know any of this about like the brain and stress and like the actual neurobiological things that happen in the brain and the body, and you don't know what you don't know, right? Meaning, let me just give you a personal example on a physical thing for me, right? As prior to becoming a psychologist, I was a D1 athlete. I wore and tore my body out pretty bad, which is what forced me to retire from that line of towards that career. But I just continued to kind of wear and tear on my body after that because it was just normal to me. I'm like, oh, soreness here, neck tightness when I wake up, like that's just normal to me. And then I went and got my PhD. I was hunched over like this, looking at computers. I didn't have a setup like this. I didn't have a chair, a good chair. I would just sit on stools. It sounds silly that I didn't really know what that did to my back and my body. I didn't know. And then about 3 years ago, my back went out and I was literally in shambles. I was like, this came out of nowhere. What's happening? I've never had back problems. What? I was literally, these are the things I was saying. Then I went to, a doctor. I got PT. She explained everything to me. I learned so much. And she was like, this isn't out of nowhere. Like this has been building for you for years. Those signs that you wake up with when this is what that is. This is what, and I just had no idea. So it wasn't that I was going, I know that this is wrong, but I don't want to go do anything about it for years. I didn't understand the impact that was having on me. I just didn't know until shit hit the fan, right? So if we're applying that back to first responders and mental health, is I find, yes, there are first responders who are aware earlier on maybe that it does happen and they're just like, I don't want to do anything about it. But more often I find they don't really realize that
Mm-hmm.
that's happening. They don't really realize it until it's too late, right? Until, that ball of snow has accumulated and they're like, what's happening? This came out of nowhere. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I have several clients that I just finished seeing when they first came into me. My consult call, they're like, this is happening out of nowhere. And then they meet with me in the first couple sessions, they're learning about this and they're like, oh, like I hadn't, oh, right? So I think that's really important, like teaching this stuff so that myself individually, I have the confidence to be able to understand where I'm at and be like, okay, I'm kind of out of sync here. Maybe I don't know what to do exactly myself about that, but I know I can reach out to a peer, or maybe I do have a therapist that I go to, at different times. So I think that's what's really important to understand too.
I think to kind of also talk about on something on top of that too is a lot of times I see like this invincibility factor. And I remember learning about this like when we were learning about like teenagers and how they're like, oh, this happens to people, but it would never happen to me. And I feel like I see that a lot of times too. It's like, yeah, PTSD happens, but that's not going to happen to me, or that would never happen to me. And then like next thing you know, you're like, shit, I'm having some symptoms, but that would never happen to me. So this can't be, there's some denial there. And
Oh,
again,
yeah.
denial is adaptive, right? Like it is protective, and to some degree it's, effective. It's an effective protective mechanism. But yeah, I feel like I see that sometimes too, where it's like, oh yeah, like PTSD happened. I'm thinking of one, officer that I know right now, who's not in therapy and definitely has that, that invincibility factor. Like, yeah, that happens for other people. And I support them going to therapy and, I'm going to encourage them to go to therapy, but that would never happen to me. And I'm
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
That's a great point, Robyn. I see that all the time too. I hear it all the time. I heard it probably 3 times in the last month from like new clients, and they say, I'm embarrassed to tell you that I've been active on my peer support team for years. I know this
yep.
happens, but I never thought it happened to me. Like I've literally heard that all the time.
No.
And my husband, who's not in public safety, but he has all his family members are in public safety, and he's commented on that many times. He's like, it's almost like there's a lot of folks the ones who are more aware of these things, it's almost like it's not, oh, that doesn't happen to me though. So yeah, I see that a lot too.
Yeah, and I love this conversation. And I'm curious your guys' opinion, right? So say that didn't happen, right? The first responder, the service member is not waiting until last minute. She's really pretty, by the way. I just looked at her and I'm like, oh my God.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. I just almost lost my train of thought. Wow. So say the first responder service member is not like that, right? And he or she is aware and is like, I know where to go. I know who to reach out to get therapy. I know my employment assistance program. What are some of the challenges, I'm curious both of your opinions, of going to a quote unquote non-culturally competent, shitty, not prepared to work with a first responder, service member, therapist, and that may be like the EAP being like $110 for 50 minutes.
Cheaper than that. Cheaper than 110.
Okay. We'll pay a low price for you to go see this therapist because that checks our box, even though they probably don't even know what to look for in a therapist, but they think they're doing the right thing. So it may be like negligent or non-negligent.
Well, and this is not to shit on every EAP therapist because, like I said, I'm contracted with EAP because I want there to be more culturally competent therapists out there. But a lot of therapists join EAP programs as a referral source. So it's not even that, and they don't even know what they're getting themselves into. I feel like sometimes, it's not even because they're ill-intended. It's just that they don't realize maybe necessarily that the EAP that they're contracting with to get referrals is connected to a department. They're going to be getting a bunch of clients with trauma, right? So, but I feel like that happens a ton too. It's EAP. A lot of times EAP therapists, again, a lot of times this isn't a blanket statement, but a lot of times EAP therapists are on there for referrals. Like they need, referrals or something like that. Right. And they may or may not know that they're contracted with local departments.
And that's if they're being sent to an actual therapist. And then you have people out there who are like, I was a first responder. I had PTSD. So come to me and pay me money and I will coach you through this.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's a lot of that out there too, which is just as bad, if not worse in many ways. I mean, it's an epidemic. It's really, really bad. And it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. Because especially if someone is, their ball of snow is massive at this point and they're teetering on the edge of that cliff, so to speak. And then because they're afraid or they can't afford, to go to someone more competent, but a lot of times it's more of like, they won't trust me. They don't understand me. So this person said they know what this is like. And they go to that. It's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. I mean, what Robyn and I, the training we go through is extensive. It's not talk therapy. It's not, I had PTSD. I always tell people, it's just, think of this as in the medical world. Like, if you had cancer, would you want your full treatment program to be someone who said they had cancer, but they have no medical background? Like, would you want? No, of course not. It's no different here. Now, could it be helpful to see a doctor who specializes in oncology and to have a peer who's been through cancer and who could be there to support you? Of course, but that's peer support. That is not the same as mental health treatment. It's not. And that is what I see Robyn knows, go on LinkedIn, go on Instagram, and you just see these people that are just, some of them I think are coming from a good place, but it's ignorance, and some, I'm not so sure what kind of place they're coming from. So yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. And I think too, like a lot of times that sets up projection, right? Yeah. And like humans, like we see what we know a lot of times too. And so like, if you don't have good, solid training, then you kind of put yourself at risk for projection. Well, I had this, so then you must be struggling, blah, 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 or this is how I responded. So you are responding X, Y, Z. And like, that's my biggest ick with And again, hot take here because I'm a military first responder spouse, but that is my big ick with like military first responder spouses only having that as their lived experience. And I told, like, I have done an active duty lived experience, I have the reserve experience, I have the LEO experience, right? Like, I have a good solid experience. And look, there's a lot of advantage to that, right? Like, I get a lot of insight and understanding to that world, but it's still limited. Every department is different. Every branch of the military is different. Enlisted versus officers are very different, very, very different. You know, every base is different. Every first responder realm is different. Like, everything is different. And so I just think that you have to be really careful too, because this like lived experience thing, I'm not saying there's no value to it. There absolutely is a level of value to it. And I do get to bring in different things. And I have one individual who knows that I've lived through, you know, a deployment in a relationship, who has, you know, come to me for therapy, you know, to process through being in, you know, being on deployment and managing a relationship. But there is still training outside of that it's mandatory to me. Like, it has to be done. And so I think that's the other thing too. Like, that kind of stuff just sets up this opportunity for projection. And then when you get into that kind of slippery slope too, it's, if someone's telling me I should have PTSD, or if someone's telling me I should have reacted this way because that's how they reacted and they have the same lived experience as me, what's wrong with me if I don't, or what's wrong with me if I didn't? So it's just super dangerous, and every individual is different, and a good trained therapist knows how to separate their own shit, but bring in their shit when they need to, or when it's actually applicable, right? But also knows where to keep that in check. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then on top of that, like the training, that the lived experience, like someone like you, Robyn, with the lived experience you have, as like icing on the cake, but the cake that you have is all your extensive training, right? You're trained in evidence-based treatments. Like, that is what is necessary. And so I know we've seen and come across a lot of therapists that are like, I'm trained, or I have all the competency I need because I'm a spouse, or my grandfather was a firefighter, or whatever, right? But they don't actually have extensive training in evidence-based treatment. That is not going to do much. And that is going to show in the therapy room with a first responder, especially if someone's, you know, more severe, and they come into someone that actually doesn't have the cake. They just have the icing on top.
Yeah. And I'm kind of thinking, right. And obviously with her expertise and you as well, Brooke, we have so many people that reach out to us and they're like, hey, I'd love to be a contracted therapist through the Overwatch Collective. How do I go through the vetting program? And you know, I'm just a cop in the military, dude, right? I'm like, hey, babe, can you like help me out? Can you look at this profile? Can you look at all this training and everything? And it's like, you go to the website, and there's been some where truly
there's nothing.
And this is literally an email coming in saying I'm requesting to be a therapist, as I just see this as we're recording. But you kind of see the hey, I want to be contracted with your through your nonprofit. And then I'm like, hey, can you help me do some vetting? Like, let's do some research on this, because obviously you have to go through the vetting process. And then on the website, there's nothing about first responder or military, you know, which is a tough part. And then if I'm thinking about it from the lieutenant, captain, chief, deputy chief position of a police department, fire department, they've been doing this job for 20 years, so they don't know what it looks like to even have a culturally competent or well-trained therapist. So in their head, they're trying to do what they can for their employees and get a therapist for the department, because they hear that's the latest and greatest thing to do. And then they get somebody that does annual or biannual check-ins that has no real training.
Yeah, so Brooke and I are very familiar with seeing those. Hey, I just got contracted with the department. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you guys give us some advice? And Brooke and I are like,
advice. This is the first time I'm doing this ever, and I'm going in after there was a 15-person fatality call. Thanks.
Yeah.
And that's got to be harmful, right? Like what you guys were just mentioning like 20 minutes ago, where that could be doing a disservice, that could be harmful. Yes. But some of these people that are in the positions reaching out and getting tasked ultimately with like having to find a therapist for their department have no idea what they're doing or what to even look for. So
or get misled.
So what advice like obviously we talk about this, but like I'd like to give the listeners and viewers like a little bit of advice and something to look for if they're trying to find somebody.
Well, I know that you guys now have a pretty strict standard like vetting process where they have to be trained in an evidence-based trauma treatment. They have to have military and or first responder training, not just like lived experience. And et cetera. I know you guys have like a lot more like formal stuff there, which I think is good. And again, like I'm not trying to like shit on people who have lived experience. Again, I have lived experience, but I just know through my own lived experience how limiting that is. So I do think like I think my big thing, I remember someone talking about cultural humility, right? And this like willingness to always learn and be open to learning and understanding like your own limitations. And things are always constantly evolving too. So again, like I know a lot more about like cop world, right? Like I know a lot more about that than I know about fire or EMS. I'm not saying I don't know anything about those worlds. I obviously do, but if I wouldn't have been trained, if I would not have gone out of my way to get training in working with public safety as a whole, not just law enforcement, right? I would not know shit because knowing what it is to be a cop wife, doing ride-alongs with cops or whatever does not give me knowledge and insight into fire, EMS, dispatch, etc. Right? So I feel like I had a facility reach out to me recently and they were like, look, we're trying to open a first responder wing, but we want to hear from experts. Like, what do we need to have from our staff in order for you to feel confident to refer to me? And I said, training, because if you're just saying, oh, I was a first responder, or I, am a first responder spouse, or my grandfather, who, whatever, I'm like, I'm not saying I would never refer to you, but I'm definitely going to explore some other options before I go that route, and the cool thing is we live in 2025. There's a fuck ton of really good trainings available online. I know, Brooke, you have some trainings, that you do. I know I do trainings, but there's also great ones online that you can either get free, cheap, or you can invest. I invested a ton of money in the Cortigo one, and I was very, very pleased with it. When I see someone who has achieved that, I know that they've done some pretty rigorous training, that they had to go through ride-alongs, that they had to get letter of recommendations. So I see that and I'm like, okay, they've put some time and work into actually learning and understanding this, right? I don't know. What about you, Brooke? What do you feel like and what do you see? You have the CV of my dreams, so there's that.
Like Greg was saying, like what, how can we like ask them what is your training? What makes you specialized in working with first responders? If they say because I was one or because I'm married to one, cool. What training do you have in working with first responders? What training do you have? Because I mean, I know what how hard Robyn works, but like, I mean, this wasn't like my training. I mean, God, I spent 35 hours a week for 8 years on top of research, writing grants, running research with first responders across the country, and all of that. But just on the clinical side, you're doing rotations in the PTSD inpatient and outpatient units in the VA. You're training directly under specialists, right? And you're learning. Yeah. You're learning. You're learning everything, right? And then, like with first responders, being directly trained by public safety psychologists for 5 years, not just, I saw a couple that have come through my practice. Like you're training and utilizing evidence-based treatments with these populations, because applying cognitive processing therapy to a civilian is not the same as doing it with a military first responder. It's not. So you need to learn not only the base of, these evidence-based treatments, but it's training in working with these populations, not just, oh, they just happen to, pass through my practice here and there. That's not training.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really quick, I kind of want to touch on CPT really quick since you brought it up, Brooke, because I feel like, and our goal obviously is to have 3 to 5 therapists in every single state, a podcast attached to every single one of them. But when we go through the vetting process, I see all that, I play a part in it. And a lot of the times people are just saying, oh, I'm EMD
Or
trained.
EMDR.
EMDR. I should know that by now. EMDR trained so I can work with trauma and first responders and all that. But thoughts?
Well, my biggest ick is, well, my other biggest ick, because I already said I had a biggest ick, but EMDR training does not teach you, and I know, Brooke, you've now done EMDR training yourself, but EMDR does not teach you trauma. It teaches you how to use EMDR and how to work, like how to use EMDR, but it doesn't teach you trauma. Like, you have to have a foundation and understanding and training and whatnot in trauma separately from EMDR. EMDR is a tool to help treat trauma, but if you don't know trauma, then a lot of therapists only have EMDR training. And I've had a lot of clients do EMDR with other therapists who weren't really knowledgeable about trauma at all, and it did a lot of harm. And the VA recognizes EMDR as an evidence-based treatment, but that doesn't mean it's standalone. And I would say the same for CPT. I would say the same for, IFS, any modality, right? Like, you have to have additional training. But I know I just recently got trained in CPT. I know, Brooke, you've been doing CPT for a while. And it's definitely different. It's evidence-based. The VA has used it for a very, very long time. I know, I remember like doing some Socratic questioning with one of my clients, just really kind of loosely. And I was like, holy shit, like, this is good. And I text Brooke and I'm like, this is good. And Brooke's like, this is probably one of the greatest skills you can have as a clinician. But I know, Brooke, you can probably talk a lot more about CPT than I can.
Yeah, so we're saying CPT for those listening, cognitive processing therapy, not CBTs. Cognitive processing therapy is, along with prolonged exposure, the two gold standard treatments for trauma, not EMDR. EMDR is that's the one below it, the rung below it. EMDR is a company, and they've done really well with their marketing. So people only know about EMDR, and now you have little John talking about EMDR. It is evidence-based. It's in the top three.
And Miley Cyrus.
Huh? Yeah, and Miley Cyrus. Yeah. So EMDR is evidence-based, but a lot of people don't hear about cognitive processing therapy or prolonged exposure. And all three of these evidence-based treatments approach trauma in the same way. You're taking a non-avoidant approach, an exposure-based approach to trauma, which is necessary for evidence-based treatment of trauma. They just go about it in different ways. And so, as Robyn, I know, does too, is, we take the modalities, like maybe a little bit of this from EMDR and a little bit of this from cognitive processing therapy, maybe a little bit of this from PE. Like, I just finished trauma treatment with a client who no longer has impairing symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And I kind of took a little bit from everything, right, and applied it uniquely to my client. But unfortunately, it's a frustration to me that a lot of people just they think that EMDR is the only thing that exists. They don't realize that it's one of three evidence-based treatments, and that there's actually more efficacy or more research to support the efficacy of two other treatments. So when I hear people that are like, I'm a trauma specialist, all I do is EMDR, I'm like, well, you're not really a trauma specialist, right? Maybe you're really good at EMDR, but that's not a trauma specialist necessarily. You need to be trained in a lot of different things. Again, if we go back to a medical doctor example, if you have a medical doctor saying, I only use this one treatment, it's a very broad-based thing, like cancer, let's use cancer again, right? That's broad, right? And you can get different areas, it could be at different stages, right? But I only do this one thing for everything. I don't know. I wouldn't think that that's particularly the best specialization. So EMDR is a great treatment. Cognitive processing therapy is awesome. It's a trauma protocol that if you're doing the protocol for front to back, it's about 12 to 16 sessions. But it takes a little bit of a different approach from EMDR. It's very much on the cognitive side, hence the cognitive processing therapy. But it's very much about, sorry?
People don't know that, right?
Yeah.
Cognitive clinical jargon, but that means like you're thinking.
So trauma very much, trauma significantly impacts someone's the way someone thinks about themselves, about other people, and about the world, right? So what cognitive processing therapy does is it's an exposure-based, a cognitive exposure-based treatment that helps individuals process their trauma in a way to be better able to understand how trauma has impacted, their view of the world and the way they think, and then to actually process through that. It's my personal favorite. in addition to exposure, behavioral exposure. But I think it's important that people understand that it's not only EMDR, because I've also worked with first responders that went and tried EMDR. It wasn't a great fit for them. And then they're like, that's it. I'm screwed. Like, I am permanently broken. This thing that I hear everyone raving about helped everyone else but me. And they don't know. Yeah, it's not a good fit. Just like cognitive processing therapy is not a good fit for everyone, and prolonged exposure is not a good fit for everyone.
And that's why it's one of the good things. And Brooke, you mentioned this, where it's like or I think you did, where you can pull some from EMDR, you could pull some from CBT, where it's like the same thing goes for the person that you're seeing, right? The first responder, the service member, like me as a Coast Guard reservist, like I could pull stuff from my time in the Marine Corps infantry. I could pull stuff from my time in the active law enforcement, on the SWAT team, on the drone team, whatever, and I can use all of those thoughts, those skills, and those trainings to articulate and then bring up like a good idea or a good response to a solution, where that's what you kind of want to see in a therapist too.
Yeah.
So that's our goal, right? And for everybody that's listening, like when we first started the Overwatch Collective, we kind of opened the door to everybody, right? We were like, we want to help everybody. We want to pay for therapy, blah, blah. And it was like, we didn't really know what the hell we were doing, right? Jesse and I both Marine Corps infantry, Coast Guard, and I'm a cop. Like, we have no idea what the hell we're doing with therapy stuff. And then as we start to learn, it's like, oh, I see the other side of things, because I'm doing so many podcasts with these people. I'm learning about it, where it's like, we need to get well-trained people in there. And since we've gone through our revetting process, we've had the unfortunate kind of like uncomfortable email chain with people where it's like, hey, like we cannot contract with you anymore. We have to break this contract because of XYZ. But like, we're committed to providing therapists for the community that are well trained, that are not just gonna like be like, oh, EMDR is the like
end all be all,
be all, and you're good, So it's kind of,
and that can ruffle
one
some
of the tough
feathers,
things.
right?
It can, yeah, 100%.
And everyone
trauma
is
an umbrella, right, Robyn? I mean, trauma is an umbrella. Like, it's a, like, just say trauma and act like that impacts people the same way. I mean, there's a vast spectrum of what that looks like in people. So, I think that,
and you need a variety of tools to be able to meet, right, like those different reactions or responses.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I kind of want to transition. One of the things that we have that I want to get your guys' opinion on, I think it's, and I think this is something that we can kind of do a little bit more often, because I think it's cool to have the both of you on that are really like well-trained, competent, everything. And then, not to like blow smoke at my ass, but like the active police officer and the service member that like you guys can bounce ideas off, and I could be like, hey, I went on this call, and then you guys can give the clinical side of it.
Yeah.
But this whole notion that first responders constantly live in a state of hypervigilance. I see this on social media all the time, right? Everybody's like, oh, every first responder, you live in a state of hypervigilance. Every time you get home, you can never turn it off.
Yeah.
Your brain's always running. Like, I'm like,
you're like the least hypervigilant person.
Yo, I was at Cajun Market eating 2 donuts at 4:30 a.m. I got off work and I snuggled Robyn, and I fell asleep like in a fucking heartbeat. So, and I'm kind of curious, both of your opinions, right? Obviously, like, and when I think of hypervigilance, I think of being like on guard, being aware of my surroundings. Like, so when I go to Chick-fil-A to get the market salad and I'm trying to be healthy and everything, I sit with my back towards the door. I could see the exits like every other person, blah, blah, whatever. When I sit in a parking lot to type reports, I back my car up to a wall so nobody can get there. But it's not all the time.
No, like if I want to sit with
handing out fucking Oreo cookies to people, like, like I'm on accident scenes or alarm calls that we just had a block away, and I'm like, all right, like, you just got to secure the door, but do you want an Oreo ball that my wife made? Like, I feel like the perception is every single first responder is in a state of hypervigilance all the time. When he or she comes home, how do you turn it off? Do you take 30 minutes to sit in the parking lot out front to decompress? Like, just want to get your guys' opinion on it, but I've seen it for a long time, where it's like every cop, every firefighter is in a state of hypervigilance, and I don't agree with that.
Well, it's like I'm sure Brooke, you're familiar with the book too, the emotional, what is it called? Emotional intelligence for first responders, or
Emotional.
oh, why am I Kevin, right? Yeah, it's a great book, but I remember like giving it to Greg. We were on our mini moon. I remember like giving it to him to read, and he was like, I don't agree with all of this. And I was like, yep, like I totally, get that. And I do feel like, and it's the same with military too. And like, this is another thing I feel like, Brooke, you and I have talked about, like moral injury and how misunderstood that is also. But I feel like people just get like lumped into things, and it's like that. I think the issue is, and this is just in general, something can be more common. And so then people assume that because it's more common, it's like this blanket application, when that's not the case, because people are still individuals with different experiences and whatnot. And so I think that's also like, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you if you don't have these experiences either. I don't know, Brooke, how would you say
Yeah.
that?
I think those types of statements are also harmful, right? Because then it just gives this idea that in your head that it's like this is the way it's going to be, or like people are like, I've seen the post of like PTSD is inevitable in this line of work. No, it's not.
Mhm.
Most people who do this line of work don't eventually get PTSD. Now, too many do, right? But it's like this whole thing of like you're constantly in a state of hypervigilance. No, it's not true. There's a lot of variation. Now, again, we're going on like the psychoeducation side. First responders have a higher possibility of noticing
Mhm.
changes in their hyperarousal, to where maybe their hyperarousal, their baseline hyperarousal is higher than the general civilian, but it doesn't mean it's inevitable. And you're going to, there's so many different things that play into, like your personality, Greg, is different than the,
Yeah.
personality of, your partner or whatever, right? There's so many differences that go into it. It's always about, like, when I go in and do a critical incident response, and I'm with like a peer team and we're sitting in there, I've heard horror stories of not culturally competent therapists being brought in being like, you're all going to be so impacted by this call and you're all going to do, like, no, that's not the way it works. It's just about,
Mhm.
hey, everyone's this is like literally my protocol, my critical incident protocol that I teach peer supporters and agencies, is it's all about like the message is everyone's different, everyone's response to these things is
Mhm.
different. Someone could be completely unaffected, and that's totally normal. Someone might be more affected, someone might be in the middle. It's a spectrum of these things. So yeah, I absolutely do not agree with the message that like all first responders have a higher baseline average of hypervigilance. There's more first responders that have that, but it's not across the board the case.
Yeah. And more susceptible, but that doesn't mean it's a guarantee. I think too, like we've talked about, I know for you, like you've said, like once we got married, like the way that you approach like cheekier calls is different as well too. So I think it also depends on like life circumstances. Like I've
Yeah.
heard a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
people like, dead baby calls didn't bother them until they had a baby
Yeah.
themselves, right? And like I think that's another crucial thing, is like life circumstances, upbringing, like what was your upbringing like?
Did
How
you have
much
a
trauma
secure
are you bringing
attachment?
into the situation? Yeah,
Yeah.
like, are you familiar with therapy? Are you comfortable talking about things? Or do you feel safe to talk about, like, man, that was a fucked up call? Or do you feel like it's not okay to share that, right? Like, there's so many different things that
Yeah.
impact how trauma is going to show up in a person, right? And also for us, I feel like as trauma therapists, right? Like I get people, they ask me all the time, they're like, I couldn't do what you do listening to trauma all the time. And I'm like, yeah, like, and they'll be like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's just something I'm able to do. And I'm like, I wish I had a different answer for you. I mean, I take care of myself. I'm proactive with my coping. I talk about it. I go to therapy myself. I have good, therapist friends that I can talk to about it, et cetera, et cetera. But like, that's also, I think, another piece too. Like some people just have more internal like ability for it. Some people don't. Like there's just so many different
Yeah. And
factors.
I think one of the big things, right? So like whether you join the military, right, at the age of 18,
Mhm.
you join the military and you meet all of your friends, your team leaders, your squad leaders, everybody meet you at 18, 19.
Mhm.
And they judge you, they base you, they see your interactions from that point on.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the first responder community, whether you start as an EMT or at 18, dispatcher at 18, police officer at 21, right? But we don't know the kind of shit, the childhood before 18. Like, so when you go on all these calls as a 25, 30-year-old, you're like, I've only known you for a year, but I don't know if the suicide that we just went on Christmas Day, one of your family members died by suicide that way, or something similar, or just a small piece of seeing somebody crying and sobbing and screaming in the fucking front yard triggered you in a way where you have to be like, I can't be here. I got to tap out. I know this is my beat, this is my sector, but like, I cannot be here, So
Yeah. I mean, Robyn, you've seen at least, I think, bits of like one of my trauma trainings, but I always talk about how, like, I call them predisposing and post-disposing factors, right? That, and if we're talking about trauma, trauma is not defined by the event. It's defined by how we process and react to the event. And what determines that is predisposing to post-disposing factors, meaning like, I mean, we're going all the way back from like, what are the messages I had around, emotions? Like, did I feel physically and emotionally safe growing up? What kind of attachment styles do I have, right? What are my experiences? What's my culture? What's my religion? What's all these things, predisposing factors. And then post-disposing is what Robyn was also talking about, right? Like, do I have a good partnership? Do I have a good marriage that I go home to? Do I have friends that I can count on? Do I just say work is work and home is home and I'm not taking shit home, which is like what I hear that a lot from my first responders, right? Like, do I have a crew that I feel connected with? Am I, all these different things after trauma exposure that also impact that. And then again, this can happen over and over and over again. It's an accumulation, but there's so many different factors. And I think this, Robyn, but the beginning of my road to becoming a psychologist, I got my master's degree at Boston University, and I was fortunate to work on, it's called the VETSA study, Vietnam Era Twin Study of Aging. And so we bring in Vietnam combat vets that were twins, and they both served in combat in Vietnam, and one would be diagnosed with PTSD and one wouldn't. That's the criteria for the study. And it was a very thorough study. They take biological markers, blood samples, all these different things. Why does one person with the same DNA have twins with the same DNA have PTSD and the other one doesn't? It doesn't just come down to genetics, basically. There's so many other factors, predisposing and post-disposing, that play, make an impact on that. So whether we're talking about PTSD or we're talking about hypervigilance or we're talking about emotional, I call it emotional profile, but just general emotional regulation, emotional intelligence, like there's so many different things that play into that.
Yeah. And I think that also, I hope that anyone listening recognizes too, right? Like, to not shame yourself based on how you're responding and comparing yourself to someone else because of that, right? Like, there's so many different things that make up who we are as people and how we respond to things. And something that might be a trigger for Greg might not be a trigger for me, and vice versa, right? And so, like, I think that's the other thing too, is like, there's just this like huge generalization, I feel like, that's been done, again, for first responders, for military, for trauma, like for all these different things, right? And like, generalization removes individuality, and at the end of the day, we are still individuals. And so I think if you're comparing yourself to someone else and then you find yourself like spiraling out of that, talking to someone who is competent and isn't projecting and has good training and all of those things can help you really sift through that, I think, in a different way too.
I think that's one of the big things in doing podcasts with all these first responders and service members. Like, I just did one with Max. He's a volunteer firefighter turned firefighter, and now he's actually going back to dispatching after our podcast. He talked a lot about comparing trauma, and even out in Germany, it's, hey, I know the people that are on my crew. I know what they've been through. I know the type of critical incidents that they've been involved in, and like, he's fine after this call. So like, there's no way in hell I can sit here and say, hey, this call's affecting me because of my childhood. Like, it's just, it's still a thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I know I was at your department too, and I think, God bless her, right? But Christy, she married us. I know you've gotten to be connected to Sergeant Strong as well, but Christy, like, I think there is a huge advantage for like your department because they know they have someone who, no matter what, they can go like kind of share. And so at least they have this like designated safe person. Now, granted, poor Christy, I think that's not even her job, right?
That's a full-time job.
Yeah, that's not even like her job there. But I think that makes a huge difference too, is like knowing that you have someone that you can just go sit in their office and say when you're struggling, right? And having, whether it's a therapist or not, like peer support is so valuable, right? And I think Brooke and I have like touched on that. It's not the end all be all, right? And like sometimes there needs to be more, but I just think that's also like crucial, is like, do you have someone that you feel safe enough to talk about like what your experience is, and you're not stuck in like this comparison or like, Googling like PTSD symptoms, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, again, when I get to if I'm doing like trainings or presentations and I get to the, part of like tips, I always preface it with saying, none of these are groundbreaking, right? It's like the little things that we do that add up, that provide the best outcomes long term. And again, this is the same for our physical body, right? It's the little things we do in our routine, in our daily lives, to be able to have our physical longevity. But being able to talk, we have the science now. There's neuroscience, neuroimaging that we have in science that shows the impact of actually talking and the impact that has on trauma processing, right? If someone's at the point of more severe post-traumatic stress, is just talking to a peer going to resolve everything? Of course not, right? There's different interventions at different points. But if we're talking about a proactive way to mitigate some of this, like, I just talk, speak.
Yeah, and I'm curious, with all the presentations and everything that you do, when you talk about this stuff and you're telling people not to compare the trauma and everything, and you're going through the science, are you, and I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, right? You're looking out at the crowd, the people that are there. Are you seeing things click? Are you seeing some reactions where they're like, oh,
all the time. Yeah, I see it all the time, where it's just, you see like the the little head nods, and the eyes, and the getting a pen, writing things down. Yeah, you see it all the time, of the things clicking, and again, then the aftermath of it, getting emails and things like that, of just like, not even from people. There's some people are like, I've been really struggling and I've had no idea what's going on, and now I'm willing and wanting to reach out. Then you have some people being like, hey, this is really helpful. I'm on my second year in the force, and I think this is going to be really helpful for me to know moving forward. I'm feeling pretty good, but now I'm feeling, like I have this information and I can use it, so yeah.
Yeah. And I think one thing too, hopefully that people in general, like listening, might realize is avoidance keeps us stuck, right? So avoidance is going to keep us in a variety of different like stuck places, not just connected to trauma, but just in general, right? Like if you have a goal that you're setting for yourself, but you're avoiding doing the things you need to do to achieve that goal, it's going to keep you stuck, right? So there's just a variety of different avenues to mitigate avoidance, but talking about it is one. And if you have a peer, that's a great entry point. Therapy with like good, solid therapists that can help you confront avoidance, which is a huge part of CPT as well, right? Is confronting avoidance. That's big too. And I think like avoidance, as people, it is natural for us to avoid pain, seek pleasure, right? So it's against our human nature to not avoid what is making us uncomfortable, but avoidance does ultimately keep us stuck.
Yeah, avoidance is what prevents normal recovery from traumatic stress. So every evidence-based treatment for trauma is going to address avoidance. Now, when me and Robyn are saying avoidance, there's different types of avoidance, and the ones we'll see more often in our, but this is the case for most individuals, even civilians, but in public safety, in the military world, it's not always avoidance like, I'm not going there because it's too crowded, so I'm not going to go there, right? We call that external avoidance, and that happens. But a lot of times what my first responders do is I call it the check engine light, So when our check engine light comes on in our car, It doesn't mean that there's something terribly, horribly wrong. It could be something as simple as, hey, it's time to kind of get your oil changed, right? But it just means that, okay, we need to pay attention. The light's on. What's it saying? What do I need to do to make sure that the light goes back off, right? Now, the types of avoidance that we see a lot in first responders is you can actually avoid by doing things. Not I'm not going, or I'm not going around that
Working
person.
overtime.
Yep, working overtime, constantly staying busy, making sure
Yep,
that,
seen it. Yep.
I coping humor, yes, I did research in my doctoral program. I collected data and did research on the positive impacts of coping humor in public safety. But if it's always coping humor, because I don't even want to get near anything that might involve emotions with a 10-foot pole, right? That's avoidance too, right? So I'm doing these things and I'm just going and I'm laughing and I'm this and I'm that. And like, I just, boom, just avoiding all that. That is also avoidance.
I have seen that so many times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
People working overtime, people grinding more than often on overtime. And you're like, why are you here right now? And they're like, oh, shit's going on at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months later, they're still working overtime. And then at some point, you have to face it, right? And then you just fall into the divorce, the challenges there and everything. So there's two things that I kind of have on this list that I want to get your opinion on. We've been talking about this, and especially this call, and I know we keep kind of bringing up this call, and I've actually been thinking about it quite a bit.
Well, it just happened last night. So
it just happened last night. Thank you. With this call, suicide being selfish versus not being selfish. So, Brooke, I've seen all of your videos about this. I know there's so much stuff out there. And I see both sides of it. Last night's call with opening up stockings and preparing to open up gifts, and then somebody going in the opposite room across the hallway and shooting themselves in the head with a Glock is pretty fucking selfish, in my opinion. Because pulling up on scene, parking in the driveway, and seeing the family on the ground crying, screaming, everything was horrible.
Yeah.
And then not only that, after the scene was kind of like secure and he was gone, there was some definite details that I don't even want to describe on here. All over the floor, on the walls, everything. Selfish, in my opinion.
The thing, though, I want to talk about, and I know, Brooke, you can talk about this too, is like suicide can also be super, super, super impulsive. Yeah. Right. And so it can be impulsive sometimes too. And I know, Brooke, Brooke, you are big on Joiner's interpersonal theory of suicide, right? Which is also what I know and what I love and like how I kind of see things through frame. And if you don't know about that as a clinician, like you absolutely, I feel like need to. I'm sure Brooke, you can agree. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I feel like it's one of the better ones because in a lot of ways, especially for, public safety service members, et cetera, right? Like these individuals feel like they are doing the right thing through suicide. Not always, right? Like, not always, but sometimes, a lot of times people think that they are doing the right thing by like removing themselves from the situation. They see themselves as a burden, right? And so if they can, and in that way, they think what they're doing is honorable, right? Like if I see myself as a burden and I remove the burden from my family is not what I'm doing, then honorable. And so it's this just like this fucked way of thinking, but not all individuals, right, are thinking that way, but sometimes that is the case. And I know, Brooke, you can probably talk more on that as well.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts around this. So first, to comment on what Robyn's saying. So she's saying Joiner's theory. So she's talking about the interpersonal psychological theory of suicide. So it's a theory of suicide to help explain why people die by suicide. And anyone who tells you they know exactly why, they're lying to you. So don't believe them. But this is a theory that's been very, very widely researched and was actually developed specifically for first responders and military, and has been widely studied. And I completed my dissertation, research using this theoretical framework within public safety. But so what she's talking about is the theory posits basically that the desire to die in and of itself is not enough for someone to actually kill themselves. Okay, because every year we see the same stats that of the 1.5-ish million people that say they seriously thought about killing themselves, less than 10% attempt. Okay, so that's a big jump between the two. So the desire to die in and of itself is not enough. Someone also has to have in conjunction what's called the acquired capability for suicide, which is higher tolerance to pain and a decreased fear of death. Okay. Now let's go back to the selfish thing. So in that desire, that factor of desire to die, it's not just I'm sad and I'm depressed. Okay. Research shows over and over again, there's two aspects that are typically present in individuals who are seriously thinking about killing themselves. And it's thwarted belongingness, which is I don't feel like I'm part of a group. I don't feel like I belong. No one understands me. And perceived burdensomeness. So this is when someone starts to believe that their death is worth more than their life, that them being alive is actually harmful to the people that they love. I'm a burden. I'm toxic. They're better off without me. Okay. Now, when we're considering suicide from that point of view, I'm not going to say, because I'll never say all people, but in my line of work, I've been doing this for a long time. It would take me a long time to try and think about one person I've worked with who's attempted suicide, who's seriously thinking about suicide, who doesn't communicate some sense of burdensomeness, perceived burdensomeness, whether it be to their family, to their friends, to society as a whole, right? Now, that doesn't really match up with the definition of selfishness, which is, I don't care about them. I need to do this because it's what I want, right? So this is best for them, okay? So we'll see that perceived burdensomeness. Now, after I heard about the call that you went on last night, the first thing I told my husband is what a lot of people don't understand is what gets someone to the point where they're thinking, it's not like they're better off without me. I should just go. I shouldn't be around anymore. That typically does not have the theme of selfishness. It's burdensomeness, which is different than the theme of selfishness. Now, what you responded to last night, how they did that would have themes of selfishness to it, right? What gets someone to the point that they're like, I'm willing to take my life, different than selfishness. Getting a gun and going down the hall when your family's right there and saying, fuck
Celebrating
it.
Christmas of all things.
Correct.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I'm always kind of like they're kind of different aspects to it.
And I'm glad you're talking about it like that too, because obviously I know joiner's theory as well, right? And like that's a huge framework that I, look at as well. And then I also think about like shame and guilt connected to that. I know Dr. Springer talks about that in her stuff, who I do some, work with. But last night I was really having a hard time reconciling too, because I just couldn't get past the holiday piece. Everyone's in the, living room opening gifts. Like I was like, ugh, like, and again, and I said to Greg last night, I'm like, everyone has their struggle, right? Like there's mental health stuff behind this, right? Like there's so much more behind this, but I'm really struggling too with like, I feel like there are selfish aspects. I think I said that specifically. I was like, I feel like there's some selfish aspects in there and I'm having a hard time reconciling that as someone who tries to help people, come to terms with, suicidality and wanting to live, or some survivors of suicide or whatever. I'm like, it's so hard. And there are some people who strictly think suicide is selfish. There's some people who strictly don't. Like, I think there's a spectrum. I think individuals are on a spectrum, right? But I also feel like last night felt super impulsive to me. I feel like a lot of times I hear a lot about impulsivity. And that's why a lot of times when I'm working with clients who have some suicidal, ideations or thoughts or whatever, right? Like we try to give as much opportunity to break that impulsive cycle as possible, right? Whether that's like, having, if it's firearm by chance, right? Like having the firearm broken into pieces and spread across, whatever, just as many barriers you can have to interrupting that impulsive process as possible. I feel like it's big and, give some space for, different thinking to kind of come in, but it's, I think it's just so complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so I think from like the first responder point of view, right? Like can you hear the dogs in the background at all?
Yeah. They're losing their shit.
They're losing their minds. Yeah.
Someone's got to be delivering a package.
God forbid Amazon walks in front of the house.
Someone's ringing our doorbell.
It's UPS. God forbid UPS shows up the house. It's like you can't come here whatsoever. And it's
so funny.
It's just someone's packages, But so anyways. My opinion from last night after seeing this call for service, right? You think of how many people in the first responder community are affected by that and have their own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And then those thoughts have like an opinion on their own thoughts if they were to go to therapy. If that kind of makes sense whatsoever. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, I call it the ripple effect. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a ripple
yeah,
effect of that one call that you went on. Of that one call that you went on, there's a ripple effect, right? And imagine if
yes,
there's being rocks thrown in the pond all
yes,
the time.
and trust me, like in addition to that call last night, we went on so many domestic violence calls.
Mhm.
People are drinking. There was another suicide attempt that in another precinct that I didn't go to. My brother, with Pasadena Fire Department in Southern California, said that the other squad went to a hanging on Christmas, right? So, like, you think all across the country, all these first responders, and that's the police officer, that's the firefighter, the EMT, if they make it to the hospital, it's the trauma nurse, it's the deputy coroner, the dispatcher answering the 911 call is also hearing the family member saying, "Oh my God, he shot himself," because the comments in our call were kind of fucked. We didn't know what was occurring until somebody actually got on the phone and they were like, "He shot himself in the head. He's here. It's nothing other than that. It's not an active shooter, and we'll be waiting outside." But like, you think about how many people are affected by a single call, and then you don't deal with that, and then 2 weeks later there's another one. 3 weeks later there's another similar call or smaller little calls. It's just it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the other thing to kind of go along with that is, Rob. So I don't necessarily believe that, or so my perspective, my professional perspective, just in my training and stuff, is that suicidality is not impulsive. It takes a long time. It's the act of killing oneself can be impulsive.
Yes.
Just like when we understand the mechanisms, the underlying mechanisms of what gets someone to the point where they're like, I don't really want to be around anymore. Like, I'm toxic. My kids are better off without me. That's not the same as selfishness, but grabbing a gun and, during Christmas dinner on Christmas Day with kids in the house and saying, fuck it, and doing that right there, that is a selfish act. Is that so? Like the same with the impulsivity, like that's an impulsive act and it's selfish. But that person didn't just get in a fight with their wife, I think you said, and be like, well, that's it. Out of nowhere, everything was good. And I just
there was definitely more there.
So these are the build up to that. And even like Robyn, when we're treating, Robyn and I'm putting words in your mouth. I don't treat suicidality. I'm treating the things that are leading someone to think that they no longer have a purpose here in life, right? That they no longer, that they're toxic, that their kids are better off without it. What is leading to that? Is it such overwhelming guilt due to moral injury? Well, then I'm treating that, right? Is it such severe post-traumatic stress that they now believe that what is it that's leading to this? That's what I'm treating, not, well, let's convince you that your family loves you and that you are worth living, right? That's not what we're doing.
That's pointless. That's a pointless endeavor, honestly. So I'm glad you made that clarification. Yeah. It's tough. I think it's such a sensitive topic, and it's tough, and it's so convoluted, and there's so many like different things that are involved in that process. And again, every individual is different as well. But yes, I agree with you. The act itself can be impulsive, because it's not always impulsive.
Not always, but it can be very impulsive.
You don't just like wake up out of nowhere and like, I think I'm gonna, die by suicide today. Like that's not, there's always some underlying factors.
Yeah. And like you were saying, Robyn, like addressing some impulsivity in therapy would be a protective factor, but it wouldn't be the foundation of therapy, right? It's like, I remember when I was getting my doctorate at University of Houston, there were like 5 suicides from students in 1 year. They're jumping off the same building. And they were like, well, we're shutting this building down completely. And I was like, okay. And I guess, this is at a macro level, but it's like, okay, but why are all these students killing themselves, right? So it's kind of a similar, like we want to address the impulsivity, but what is leading someone to actually even consider this in the first place?
And
then, when people have the idea that suicide is selfish, guess what that does?
It creates so much shame. Oh my God. It creates so much shame. Yeah. I know we've talked about that too, right? Like you and I have talked about like how shaming it can be, in that sense too. Yeah.
Shame and guilt.
I know too, like we've recently had, and I think that's the other thing too, is people, we hear a lot of times like people having suicidal ideation, like as a side effect from medication, which I know is next on your list because I can see your phone right there. But, having suicidal ideation as like a side effect to medication or, even certain treatments or things of that nature, right? And not understanding that that's a possible side effect. Like so many times, like people may get prescribed medication and not be told about the possibility of that. And then it kind of sends a spiral, right? Because you don't know how to handle that. And that is unfortunately a super common side effect for a variety of different medications for mental health, stuff. And not even just mental health. I mean, I think it's, a side effect for a lot of medications in general. But if you aren't getting proper psychoeducation on the medications that you're being provided and that this is a possibility and what to do if this surfaces, et cetera, that can also be super dangerous.
And there's not much of it, right? Like we've heard time and time again where the VA, they just, and it's not to knock on the VA at all, but they prescribe one or two medications, just like, here, let's try this, see how things go. But there's no, hey, based off of what I've seen from the last 50 clients, they have had some suicidal ideations. If you're feeling this way, that's normal. You can call us, we can change your medication, etc. But there's just like, all right, we're going to prescribe you all this medication. And then that person's having suicidal ideations. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't know this. I thought medication was supposed to help me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So as someone who spent a lot of time working in VAs, I'll be honest, like at the end of my postdoc residency, my mental health had deteriorated so much, working in a VA. The leadership in my postdoc program were really horrific people too. So, but, it became hard as the therapist, like seeing what was going on and having no capability or power to do anything about it. Now, there are some really fantastic clinicians at VAs. I mean, at least I think a lot of good clinicians have started to leave the VA and go into private practice.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're excellent training centers. They're some really great clinicians there. But as a therapist, like a psychologist there, what I would see is that like the pills would come first. It'd be like, here you go, here's the pills. Well, we have a 6-month wait list in the PTSD clinic, but hey, here's some benzodiazepines and a couple of other things, and this should hold you over until you can get in. And that would just significantly worsen, someone's mental health symptoms and their condition and what they were experiencing. And so I have found that there's a lot of situations in which pills and medications are over relied upon without proper psychoeducation about what it does, what to look out for, what some side effects might be. And if we're talking about mental health, that time and time again for 25 plus years, every single legitimate study has shown that medication only doesn't do shit. So you need evidence-based treatment along with medication. If you're going to be on medication, you don't even always need medication, but sometimes it can be effective in conjunction with evidence-based treatment.
Yeah, I think too, another thing I feel like I see, like, and it's not just at the VA, it's like systemically, right? Like systemic pressures, whether it be related to seeing a certain amount of patients or limitations on what, the individual provider can do, et cetera, and then burnout, obviously, in any level of care, right? If a provider, whether that's a medication management provider, a therapist, et cetera, a provider, when they're experiencing burnout, it can lead us to be less effective in how we're delivering treatments. Even if they are good, solid treatment choices, it can lead us to being less effective. And I feel like too, a lot of times what I hear, unfortunately, and this is where where I started providing free therapy for veterans, was because I felt that the VA system was just so overrun that they don't have the staff to provide the quality of care that they intend to. And it's not Like, I don't think anyone at the VA is trying to be a shit provider. I just don't. And maybe that's me naively. I think there are shit providers out there, right? Like, I'm not saying that that's not the case. I think there are some providers that definitely have a God complex and are in it for the wrong reasons. But I choose to believe that most providers are well intended, right? And are doing things, and they may be working against different barriers, whether it's being understaffed or systemic barriers, because I've worked in systems where decisions that I wanted to make, I felt like I couldn't make because there was some kind of systemic control over that, right? And ultimately, that's why I don't take insurance, because I don't want someone dictating the treatment that I can provide that I feel like might be best for someone. But at the end of the day, if we are not taking care of ourselves, and again, sometimes burnout is because of a systemic problem, but if we're not monitoring our own burnout as providers, that influences the quality of care that we're providing as well.
Yeah. And I think too, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these VAs, especially some of the bigger ones that have like bigger, like PTSD inpatient and outpatient units, their workforce is primarily what they refer to as trainees, right? Which is what I was, right? And so if you're on the road to become a psychologist, you don't make money for 10 years at all. And you can't have a job. That's your job. You're working 60
right.
to
That's
80
why
hours.
I wasn't a psychologist, because
Yeah.
I wanted to go to psychology. Like, I wanted to go that whole route. And then they were like, you can't have a job. And I'm like, babes, I already have student loans. How am I supposed to do
it's
that?
part of your contract. I mean, you couldn't do it even if you wanted to or tried, because it's not only 40 hours a week in there. You're then taking your classes. You're required to teach several college level classes. You're running your studies. You're writing research. You're doing all of that. It was 60 to 80 hours a week for many, many years for me, right? And so once you get to the point of your pre-doctoral internship and postdoctoral fellowships, you are considered a W-2 employee. But at that point, it's year 8 of doctoral training. I'm officially Dr. Bartlett, so I have the PhD. I graduated, and then you're on residency. You are still making $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you
As
were
a
in
doctor.
Southern California, how the hell are you supposed to afford life?
You don't. You just take out a lot of loans. You're miserable. It's so my point is a lot of the workforce there it's beyond like there was nothing I could do about my burnout. It was unsustainable, like real life. Like I had to get help to buy like basic needs like toilet paper and everything, and I'm overworked, and this is my 8th, 10th, 9th, 10th year. It's really tough, and so there's so many providers at the VA who are in this system of, like, I call it indentured servitude. Like it's just, and there's no way to protect against that burnout. And then you have the actual like licensed psychologists who do have a full, time salary there, but they're supervising trainees. They have to see clients. They're working against that system. That's just like, you got a 6-month wait list. You're seeing all these people suffer. You're trying to do everything you can. So the VA can be so excellent in so many ways, and then there's all these other factors that can make it really difficult for the providers and for the consumer. I mean, it would just, like, I started to develop like a lot of like moral injury type guilt towards the end of my training, because our protocol in this PTSD clinic was that someone had to meet full criteria for PTSD. So I had to do a diagnostic interview for PTSD. And if they weren't severe enough, guess what?
Yeah.
Sayonara, get back on the wait list, right? And it's just, there's just a lot of things that happen that are really, really tough. So I personally did not have a hard decision as to, should I take a job at the VA when I finished my residency? I split pretty fast, but there's just it's a big bureaucratic system. There's not like one answer to it,
Yeah. Systemic barriers, like, man, they just really impact so many levels, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the shitty things, like, for us, like, right, like as an active service member, it's like we have so many veterans, we have so many active service members who need resources, need the help, and then you hear something like that where it's like, I'm tapped or I'm running short. And like, granted, we've had VA therapists on here that are great, and they're like, hey, I care about all of the veterans, all the service members, everything they can, and I'll do whatever I can do, but we're limited on what we can do. And it's like the amount of service members that you have joining in addition to retiring after they do 20 years, whatever, they still need the same amount of support. And if you can't, like, if you can't take care of all of them, then you're doing a disservice. And that's kind of where I get it at. You know, like a lot of people have so many negative opinions about the VA, and it sucks to hear because for somebody in the service, that might be their only resource that they have.
Yeah.
And if they hear so many other people talking shit about the VA, then they have nowhere to go.
And
Yeah.
I do want to say I've had some clients who have had fabulous experiences with the VA. So it's not an end all be all for sure. And with an AP or whatever, right? Like, you know, and that's the thing. I think you, at the end of the day, if you're someone seeking therapy or treatment, I think it's best to know what to look for in terms of like what you need and what is like actual quality care for what you need, and being able to have discernment, or at least a place to go to get some feedback on like, is this the best option for me, or should I be exploring something else? Because I could even be a culturally competent, like I am not the best therapist for everyone, right? Like sure as heck, there have been clients who I would have on paper been a great fit for, but when we start working together, we're not a good fit, right? Like that's just the nature of humans working with humans. So I think that's something to consider.
And I feel like some therapists, even though they know, like what you just said, right, where it's like on paper we'd be a good fit, where some therapists are like in their head they know that they're not the best for them and not the best fit, but they'll still take them because they get money.
Yeah, that happens a lot, unfortunately. Yeah, that's whereas me, I'm like, man, I would be so uncomfortable seeing someone that I'm not a good fit, like that because if I'm not a good fit for them, then that means I'm uncomfortable,
Right.
So yeah.
I don't get it, because I'm like, shit, sometimes I am a good fit and I'm like, do I know what I'm doing here? Like maybe I don't, right? Like maybe this isn't right the best option. And I don't want to be in that situation with a client. Like I want to feel confident in the treatment that I'm providing to a client. Yeah.
And that's why for those listening too, if you're thinking about shop around for a therapist, right? Most therapists are going to offer a 15-minute, a free consultation call, however long they offer. If they don't, my personal opinion is don't consider them. I would never see a therapist if I can't talk to them beforehand. But yeah, like shop around. I've had many people that have reached out and they're like, okay, I have a couple other consultation calls set up this week. And I'm like, great, yeah, like talk to other people, like see what that's like, get information from them, see how you feel when you're talking to them. Like that's what you should do.
I love, one of my favorite things to do is to connect people with people. Like I love building connections between people. So I have no problem. And many people I think know that about me, where they'll reach out to me and they'll say like, I actually had someone message me earlier today. They're like, I need a you, but obviously I can't see you. And I'm like, this is where you need to go. Or I'll be on a consultation call and I'm like, listen, I'm hearing you and I'm not saying that I can't see you, but based on what you're saying, I feel like this person might actually be a better fit for you. And so I think what you should do is at least owe it to yourself to reach out to this individual to see if they're taking new clients and to see how you feel about it and, go from there. I don't believe in a scarcity mindset. Like and I think that's the thing too. Like, I don't believe in a scarcity mindset. So I think that if that's not my client, even if I have the space on my caseload, there's another client that is my client. Right. And I think like that's so important to me, is making sure like, I would rather be known as a therapist who gives out better recommendations than a therapist that takes on any client and isn't providing like good care.
Because eventually it's going to catch up and people are going to talk. And and that's all first responders and military do. It's like fucking high school. It literally is. Everybody knows each other's drama. Everybody knows each other's drama. Curious. So I know we're at the hour 43-minute mark. So kind of curious, one piece of advice that you guys would give.
Therapists don't give advice.
Oh, stop. Yes. Okay. Well, you can go first, clearly. To anybody that's listening to this episode that is potentially like looking for a therapist, kind of in that state of mind where it's like, I should probably go reach out to find somebody, but I don't know if I should. I don't know where to go. I've had some signs of like lack of sleep, substance misuse, etc. What's one piece of advice?
Well, I could answer this in a lot of different ways, but if you're saying piece of advice on like how they can approach doing that, is that what you're asking?
Mhm.
Kind of what I was just saying is like think of like you're interviewing them. So
Mhm.
like think about what you would want in a therapist. Like what's your interpersonal style? What like personally, like my psychologist, I don't really like super soft, like, oh, like, but some people really like that, right? But then I will say when I have a new psychologist, and when I was in my consultation, I was like, listen, I don't like soft people, so don't you come at me and try. And she was like, okay, but I'm also going to sometimes challenge you to sit with that. She's like, because maybe you don't really like feeling vulnerable. I was like, oh no. Right. So my point is like generally speaking, what kind of personality do you feel comfortable with? And like if we're talking about first responders, what is your training? I'm having problems with sleep. Specifically, I haven't been sleeping for a long time. I have insomnia. Do you have any training in treating that? And if so, what is it? Right? What is your training? What does your background look like? Like really asking questions. It's not often that someone in a consultation call ask me questions, and I'm always like, do you have any questions? Like for me?
Yeah,
No. What
yeah,
Tell me
because
about
nobody
what's
thinks about
happening.
that. Nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like ask me questions about me. So yeah,
I
that would be my recommendation.
I I had a situation here where someone I felt like was being very misleading about their competency, and my petty ass decided to link all of my trainings and certifications because here's the thing, right? Anyone can put whatever they want on their
Yeah.
website, right? So I can put on my website, I work with military and first responders, or I specialize in military and first responders, and I ain't got shit to prove that I actually have that specialization. So I have a whole personally, and this is just my pettiness, but I have a section on my website that is proof of my certifications and licensure. And again, very petty of me, but I want my clients to feel very confident that like I can back up what I'm saying I can do and what I can provide. And like you're entitled to ask that of your clinician too, and I think that's the problem is, and it makes sense, right? Like we're banking on the clinician to be the expert, right? But you get to decide who is the best case for you, right?
Mhm.
And I welcome questions. I also welcome like being told like this isn't working for me.
Mhm.
Good. I would rather know that than you walk out this door and tell everyone that I was a shit therapist because we
Yeah.
weren't
Yeah.
being honest with each other about if this was a fit or not. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I echo what Brooke says in terms of
yeah,
like you interviewing
yeah.
them,
And so I think, right, and putting my first responder hat on as the police officer and service member, I'm like, hey, I'm doing the job. I'm reaching out to a therapist and I'm doing a consultation call. I'm checking that box, and you don't even think or know, or nobody's telling you this,
Mhm.
right? Nobody's telling the 3-year dispatcher, the 3-year EMT, the 3-year police officer, firefighter, when you finally do reach out to a therapist, a matter of time, 10 years on, whatever, you can ask them questions. You should challenge them. You should check on their training and everything, because that's
Yeah.
nothing that's been talked about on this
Mhm.
podcast actually at all. Is like you can go and you could be like, hey, what type of training do you have? This is what
Mhm.
I'm having challenges with. It's kind of just like oh, I'm going to therapy. This will fix everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's great about this too, Greg, I mean, especially because you are the, founder of Talk, and then you have the listed therapist, and you have episodes that you've done with a lot of therapists. Is I've had many people, not only from this podcast, but from other podcasts I've done, reach out for therapy. And they're like, I've listened to like 4 or 5 of your episodes and I feel comfortable with your style.
Mhm.
I kind of got to know you, so to speak, through that, right? Because
Mhm.
like the way you hear me talking now is the way I interact in my therapy sessions, right? So,
Yeah.
or they can listen to it and be like, not my thing, and then I'll never
Yep.
hear from them.
Yep.
This is fine. Don't like DM me and
Yeah.
say I thought your podcast was shit, but like, but it helps people kind of get to know us a little bit better, right? So
Yep. And
this is
yeah.
helpful too.
Yeah. And that's the whole goal, right? Is to have, obviously we have a shitload of therapists in California, but the goal is to have 3 to 5 ish therapists
Yeah.
in every single state.
Yeah.
And you know how it is. Like you go to the website, you click on whatever state, you see the therapist's photo, email address, website, bio and then a podcast link to every single one of them. So then it's like in addition to just going and checking out their Instagram page or their website, like you can actually listen to their how they talk, their vibe. You can watch them now, right?
Yeah.
Like since everyone you can probably be like, oh shit, okay, I don't want to work with Greg. I don't want to work with Robyn after that. Like I want to work with Brooke. But then that first time that you reach out and you fill out our financial assistance form and you say preferred therapist, Dr. Brooke Bartlett, then you're like, okay, I've done my research. Now, when I go to work with you, it's kind of like I already know a little bit about you. I know your style.
Yeah.
So that first therapy session and that first time getting connected to a therapist is as much of a success as possible.
Yeah.
And like most of the times, it's like, hey, I need a therapist. And you're like, all right, cool. Here's a therapist at Kaiser, Blue Shield, whatever. You're going to go sit Monday at 8 a.m. You're going to go see this therapist. And it's like, you're blind. You're walking in a room and you're like,
I usually tell my clients at the first appointment, and this isn't like 100% proof, but you know, I'm sure, Brooke, you have like a normal like spiel when you're first starting with a client, but usually my spiel also includes like, if after a few sessions you feel like we're not a good fit, or if at any point you feel like this isn't a good fit, or if it's not working, I just ask that you tell me so I can help find you someone who is, so that you don't have to do this on your own. And I always say, like, I am not the best fit for every client. Like, therapists aren't the best fit for every client. Even if I have all this certification and training, etc., that doesn't mean I'm going to be the best fit for you. So please tell me so that I can help point you in the right direction based on what you feel like is working or isn't working for you. Right. That's super. Again, like I would rather be the therapist that referred everyone out because it wasn't a good fit than just saw clients just to get a paycheck. Like that's me, you know, whatever. But
Ditto.
And you're allowed to say that to your therapist, like, hey, this isn't a good fit. Or I'm not really liking your style, or I don't feel like this is working, or whatever, right? And I also love that as a therapist. I've had clients who felt really comfortable telling me when something I was doing wasn't working for them or didn't land with them or something like that. And it made me, and it continues to make me such a better therapist. And I like really, really appreciate that from clients when they can tell me like, I didn't like when you said this, or, hey, when you said this really triggered this in me. And I'm like, oh, okay. Thank you so much for telling me. That's something I can be a lot more mindful of moving forward. Right. But yeah.
That's a great conversation today.
Great conversation. I know. I'm like, holy shit. I'm trying to think about what else, anything. Yeah. I mean, we're at the hour 51 minute mark. I think we've touched on a lot, right? Like I know we had a list going on this, and like every time we would talk or like situations would come up, right? I'd be like, cause I had a list like on my notes section of my phone, like Robyn Brooke podcast bullet points. And I would just like jot down random shit and like as things would come up. But obviously it's good to have you both on to do this together. Like I think this is cool, and I think this is something that we can do every couple months. And I hope everybody out there is kind of listening to it, and it gives us a good perspective where you two can bounce ideas off each other. And then also I can give like the first responder military perspective of like responding to a call and be like, I don't think about fucking therapy or anything at all. I think about, I got to finish my report, clear the crime scene, and we got Paul spending
burrito.
And eat my burrito that's getting cold.
Or his free tamales that he gets from service calls. This is twice now that he's texted me that he's gone on a call for service and the people there gave him tamales. I'm like, what are you doing getting free food from people?
Yeah. Well, they were done lighting fireworks. They were all playing music. So I had them turn on Taylor Swift, Fate of Ophelia. And then I got tamales from them. And then we took probably about like 15 pictures. They all cycled through and took pictures. And then the little girl I helped her put her little toy baby to sleep. And then we left. That was it. But like you guys could probably attest to it. Like you have to have fun in this job, this profession. Like if you're just going to suicide, to vehicle collision, to domestic violence call over and over, and you're not having any fun, like it just gets so
I do want
It
to
hits you.
plug though that Brooke has a trigger training coming up in February, right? It's in February. I'll be attending that. So trigger, if you want to say just like briefly, because I
Yeah,
know we're
please.
coming up on time, but I think it's really good for the clinicians listening. I'm going to be taking it. I'm really, really excited about it. But triggers for moral injury, and talk is going to have Brooke come out to Louisiana in May. Have its first ever like clinician focused CEU, and Brooke is going to come out to Lafayette and talk about moral injury and things like that as well, but which we're excited about. But yeah, you want to talk about the trigger and any other ones, because I know you have a few on demand as well.
Yeah. So I will be giving, so trigger stands for trauma informed guilt reduction therapy. It's an evidence-based protocol, meaning that there's been a lot of research done on it to show its efficacy and its ability to treat moral injury. So it's not widely known. It's just kind of starting to get disseminated through like VA systems mostly, but I train clinicians and consult with clinicians who work with moral injury and how to treat it and whatnot. So I'll be giving an intensive live online in February 26th and 27th. So it'll be 10, 12, I can't remember, 10 to 12 CEUs, I can't remember. And yeah, so if you're able to attend, so if you go to my website, or you can go to Cognitive Behavior Institute, which is who I partner with to provide these trainings. You can go there. And then if you go to that site too, or my site, you'll see all the other live online trainings that I have coming up and a bunch of on-demand stuff too, if you're a clinician, that you can get CEs for as well. And they're all really low cost. Like that trigger one, again, I think it's 10 CEUs.
I think it's $100.
It's $100, yeah. So it's a really good deal. So yeah, check it out if you want.
So for anyone listening, Brooke knows her shit, whether you're a client or a clinician. Highly recommend.
And what do you have coming up?
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Oh, see, look at this. She's asking you, and then I'm like, turn
major
this.
imposter syndrome, because I'm doing a PESI one, which has me shitting bricks. Clinicians will know what PESI is. But I do have a free 1 hour on demand, good intentions, bad outcomes with Dr. Shauna Springer on TPN Health, which is free. And then we have 3 paid ones coming up. But yeah.
She doesn't like
got
talking.
a bunch of stuff going on too. So
I know. Yeah, she's fully tapped out, and she doesn't like talking about all this stuff and everything.
Available on my website, but I was really wanting to plug the trigger because I know I'm really, really excited about that. I know it's not as well known. And I think for those of us listening that are clinicians that work with military first responder population, and honestly, just people in general with trauma, I think knowing about trigger, at least in a foundational sense, is huge. And I think the fact that you're offering that and at such an affordable rate is awesome. And I'm freaking pumped about it. I'm so excited. Yeah.
Of course. Obviously, anything you want me to post, share, anything I could do to help advertise, let me know.
And that's for all clinicians.
Yeah.
That you'll share. Any contracted therapist, you'll share. I think me and Brooke are just the only ones that ever tag talk and something to share.
Like, I know other people are doing training. We have like 85 therapists. I'm like, please send your shit so we can advertise and everything.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. All right. Well, so number 1, I'm going to ask each of you, where can people find you? Where can they support? And then number 2, our motto, one more is one less, what it means to you. So, number 1, where can people find you? Number 2, what does one more is one less mean to you? Whichever one wants to go first.
Batter up, Brooke.
Okay. You can find me. My website is www.centertas.com. So centertas.com. And then I also have an Instagram, Dr. Brooke PhD. So Dr. Brooke, Brooke PhD. And you can find me there. One more is one less. I think, like I said earlier, and I mean this when I say it. Like, I know that the financial assistance that you've provided to some of the clients that I've seen, very much saved their life. Like, I've had people who come in and, had a gun in their mouth a few days before their first session with me, and then we completed treatment and they're doing pretty well. So one more is one less just means the lives that are being saved by the financial assistance that T.O.C provides.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Okay, so I also have a website, Robyn, ROBYN, SONNIER, LPC.com, RobynSonnierLPC.com. And then my Instagram is Robyn Sonnier LLC. No, Robyn Sonnier LPC, LLC.com, I think is what it is. Instagram is a lot of work, y'all. So like I'm not as active on there as I should be. It's just a lot of work. I know Brooke, you know that too. And then one more is one less. I wish I knew what I said in the last episode.
Wow.
But for me, I think one more person helped is one less person hurting. That's what that means to me.
Sweet. Nice and simple. Cool. All right. Well, everybody, appreciate you guys tuning in. Season 10, episode 3 with Dr. Brooke Bartlett, Dr. Robyn Sonnier. Appreciate you guys coming on. This was fun. And looking forward to having you out, Brooke, in May. And then hopefully in 2026, we'll be doing an in-person podcast as well. And then who knows, if we do have time, I know everybody's schedules are busy, but we could do one of these every few months and people can kind of chime in on questions, topics, anything like that. So
that'd be awesome.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. God bless America on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3, and
God
God bless.
Sorry, I was so excited to say it. God bless.